So again, we see time and time again these government officials whose responsibility was to surveil for safety signals weren't doing their job. When they saw something, they covered it up. They kept saying no red flags, no safety signals. They lied through their teeth to the American public, and I can't tell you how many people died or permanently disabled because they didn't have that information to make the decision themselves.
That's the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, Senator Ron Johnson, on new documents he says show Dr. Anthony Fauci and federal health officials were not being forthright with the American public over the potential health risks associated with the COVID-19 vaccines. Former longtime senior advisor to Fauci, David Morens, pleaded guilty to a charge of federal conspiracy related to a plot to hide government records on research grants for the coronavirus from investigators looking into the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. Morens faces up to 5 years in prison when he will be sentenced on November 12th. Well, joining me now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is Texas Congressman Brandon Gill. Congressman, look, you've been a rock star in terms of the oversight. That's near and dear to my heart for sure. Tell us what you're seeing here because, I understand that they had this prophylactic pardon for Dr. Fauci, but the reality is there are a lot of other people in that food chain. What do you see with Morens and what do you see happening potentially to others?
Well, you're exactly right. It's not just Fauci or Morens. I think there are several other people involved here. It seems to be virtually his entire team. And I think that the most offensive portion of all of this is not just the fact that they lied to the American people, not just the fact that they deliberately withheld information, that they did so illegally, that they used private emails as opposed to official emails so that the American people didn't know what they were seeing, what the risks of some of the COVID remedies, potential remedies were. I think the most offensive part about this is that this entire time, if any American spoke out against COVID lockdowns, against the COVID vaccine, against where, or spoke openly about where COVID actually originated from, they were not only kicked off of social media, not allowed, of course, on left-wing media outlets, but oftentimes were virtually shunned from civil society for saying the things that these government officials oftentimes knew about, but were hiding from the American people. I mean, this is as tyrannical as it possibly gets, and people's lives were ruined with this. And these people ought to be held accountable. So I'm glad that Fauci was held in contempt. I want to see this guy go to jail, and I'd like to see learn more about who knew what in the Fauci orbit, and make sure that they're held accountable as well.
Now, the reason they haven't arrested Dr. Fauci or hasn't been charged is because he was granted a pardon. But that pardon was done on an auto pen. Is that a valid way? And why not test it? I mean, why not put the handcuffs on him, make him do the perp walk, go to jail, and then try to get out of it by saying, oh, that is a valid pardon? Or should we just accept the idea that auto pen pardons were just legal and lawful?
You know, I think most Americans, whenever they hear auto pen pardon, kind of take a step back and wonder what in the world is going on in Washington. How is the president signing pardons, or who is signing pardons on the president's behalf? Somebody who didn't get elected, oftentimes without the president's knowledge or without the president's full knowledge. So I think there's absolutely a legitimate case that we ought to test these auto pen pardons, the legality of these, in court. Let the courts decide that, but we ought to put the effort in to actually bring that forward, because the American people are so sick of this stuff. They're so sick of a lack of accountability. And let me tell you, whenever unelected bureaucrats are signing pardons on the president's behalf, there is by definition no democratic accountability, and that has to change.
Congressman, when Congress probably finally comes back into recess, out of recess, there's a lot that has to happen. I asked Senator Barrasso, you know, the House passed the Save America Act, but the Senate didn't. We now have a $40 trillion debt that's risen by $10 trillion in just the last 10 years. I think it's even more than that. And you have a whole host of other items still on the docket. What are we going to do specifically about the debt? Because that number is just astronomical.
It is astronomical, and it can have absolutely catastrophic consequences if we let it continue and the United States hits a debt spiral or even something close to that. I think that the path for Republicans is to continue doing some of the things that we did last year in the big, beautiful bill, the working families tax cut, where we instituted the biggest mandatory spending cut ever in American history, ever. It was about $1.5 trillion. That had never been done before. And I think that's just a start. Our goal now is to make sure that we win these midterm elections so that socialists who could care less about the federal debt or deficit don't get in charge, so that we can then come back to Washington and implement, through probably reconciliation, more large spending cuts to ensure that our children and that our grandchildren don't not only inherit a national debt, but don't inherit an economy that is completely in tatters because we've been living beyond our means for so long. This has to be one of our top priorities moving forward.
Yeah, to hear the Democrats say it, oh, we're just one big tax increase away from prosperity. That's all we need. We need to increase taxes. It's just a crazy notion. Last quick comment on the rise of socialism and communism and those platforms within the Democratic Party. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think the American people have a really clear choice this midterm season. You can either elect the party that ensured that prescription drug prices have come down more than they have in the past 60 years, the party that has secured the border in record time and has deported over 3 million illegal aliens, who have seen the biggest drop in violent crime in about a century, or you can elect the party who wants to have a government takeover of your local hospital to ensure that it runs the same way that your local DMV does, the party that wants to reopen our borders as a matter of policy and give amnesty to every illegal alien in the country, and who has admitted that in order to fund that, they're going to have to raise taxes on middle-class Americans to give welfare benefits to infinity illegal aliens, or the party who wants to both defund the police and abolish prisons. I think that the contrast between the vision of the Republican Party and the Democrat Party this midterm season could not be more stark. And I think most Americans don't want extreme socialists running our federal government. They want common sense, sane Republicans, and that's what we have to offer.
Yeah, abolish prisons. What could possibly go wrong? Congressman Brandon Gill, the great state of Texas, thank you so much for joining us.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.